Right now, there are two concurrent sessions taking place. Between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. This particular session is panel 3, which are 3 separate individual presentations. Each presenter has 15 minutes to present, and we ask that you please hold your questions for when the third and final presenter presents. I am Nelson Santana, and I am both the Zoom host and the moderator for this session. And here we have Professor Sinclair from Adelphi University, who will be presenting. The title of their presentation is Decolonizing the Collection. We also have Samantha from the New York Botanical Garden, and their title is Insert Here, Writing Collection Exploration into the Syllabus. And our third and final presenter is Professor Eric Silberberg from Queens College, CUNY. And the title of their presentation is Internationalizing Book Bans, Comparison of Book Challenge Discourses in Mexico and the United States. Welcome for being here. Professor Sinclair, I pass the baton to you.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen here. Sorry, we just tested this. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Yes? Okay. Awesome. So, good afternoon. My name is Dianne Sinclair, and I am the Collections and Open Strategies Librarian at Adelphi University. Today, I will briefly touch on what decolonizing a library collection has meant for Adelphi University Library's collection development and deselection efforts. I understand how this word might be triggering and can see how it may have the opposite effect. It seems to be the most appropriate for explaining the importance of effectuating change within the library collection practices. So decolonizing the library is a term that began with the ideas surrounding decolonizing the curriculum, decentering whiteness, and allowing for more inclusivity and representation from other groups in the classroom. Decolonizing the library collection can mean different things for different libraries. To put it plainly, decolonizing of a library collection is the ongoing process that involves acknowledging, questioning, and undoing traditional collection building or deselecting practices. This process is done with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging philosophies in mind. Promoting inclusivity is the goal. We are not attempting to exclude, diminish, or erase. Libraries are tasked with a different obligation. As preservationists and stewards of knowledge, we cannot simply do away with all material representative of a certain group or historical event, as all library material serves a purpose in terms of preserving history and ideas. However, when I began this record management journey, I quickly realized that keeping everything is not possible nor practical. So what is the purpose? It sounds like a fancy way of saying weeding, right? If this was your thought process, then you would be correct. However, decolonizing encourages the act of bringing awareness to what kind of material is housed on your shelves and not just how much. By tweaking the criteria of the deselection process, we work to create a safe space for all those who are members of the community. By focusing and promoting inclusivity, we look to highlight material that benefits the entire community and deselect material that does not. Material that does not circulate in a circulating collection takes up valuable space, right? So you can look at promoting inclusivity, bringing awareness to resources in the community, replacing necessary but damaged material, if your budget allows. With budget cuts and zero increases in sight, we at Adelphi University were confronted with the task of getting creative with the resources we have while promoting the collection in a positive way. I wanted to renovate the collection to promote inclusivity as well as increase usage and free up space. As we all know, just as weeding your garden promotes healthy plants and deselecting is imperative to a healthy library collection. Without the ability to purchase all of the new material that comes out in print, librarians seem to have gone into survival mode. Our shelves looked cramped, outdated, and uninviting. The idea of weeding became unthinkable. I realize it can be difficult to weed in an academic library, as many books can be seen as necessary components to research and coursework. Getting rid of material can be frightening. Even with low usage, one might find themselves thinking that this material can be useful to someone in the future. Or I checked WorldCat and we are the only library in the area with this book. We must keep it. Or better yet, you can't erase history. No, our intent was never to diminish or attempt to erase history. The utilization of material should always be your goal. Decolonizing is not just decentering or promoting diversity and equity. It is doing away with practices that no longer hold value at your institution or match its priorities. Understanding your college's mission is imperative. One's collection, most importantly, should reflect the needs and values of the community it serves. This includes allowing for all community members to feel included and represented. So I came to Adelphi University as the Collections and Open Strategies librarian with a different perspective. Inclusivity was my goal. I was met with a limited budget and a physical collection that had not been weeded in 10 years. Trimming what we had, making it more inviting, was going to be my focus. Okay. So when you think about all of these things, right, that I just said, looking at these questions, and you're going to ask yourself some of these questions as you go on this journey, right? So think about it. What if for a moment we analyze our collections? What if this material just does not fit the current needs of the culture and climate within your organization? What if you have shelves full of encyclopedias from 1955 and your library now purchases subscriptions with updated content through databases? Law books, when your college or university has not had a law program since 1987. What if you are holding on to material that has been revised and the older content has been deemed culturally insensitive? When you deselect, ask yourself these questions. Now, this could be an issue if said material could be used for historical purposes. However, again, is it being used? So you can look at questions of is the title culturally insensitive? Does this title promote the curriculum? Does this title promote research by those in the community? And these are other ways to look at discarding, right? And if your budget allows, these are all the alternatives, right? So you have the option to deselect material in an academic library, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that material goes away. So you have ebooks, databases, journals, and these are all things that we use on a daily basis to combat this spatial problem that we have in academic libraries, right? So when I came to Adelphi University, I was met with all of these challenges. I first eliminated the entire reference section, doing a batch reallocation in ALMA. This seemed to be a strong step in the direction of inclusivity. By doing away with a collection that was no longer being updated and taking restriction off of how and when community members utilize the material, we opened a door to accessing a population of people who do not or are unable to utilize material while in the library. Second, we began deselecting material based on criteria listed on these slides. In order to accommodate all of the reference books that were housed in a different location, the deselection process had to begin in order to facilitate the shelving of our new members of the circulating collection. This empty space caused by moving the reference collection prompted the entire library collection to be shifted. This became the perfect opportunity to deselect and reevaluate the resources that we had and what was actually being utilized. When you think about a big deselection project, also think about how this will affect your signage and library maps. Thirdly, although we do not have a budget that would allow us to update full collections of books in various departments, what we do have allowed me to create a popular fiction section. This has been successful in promoting reading for leisure. Students requesting this section were delighted, as this type of inclusionary practice can be enjoyed by everyone, no matter what discipline you're in. Our goal for this coming semester is to gather focus groups to gain some insight on what students and faculty are looking for in their library and create more opportunities for outreach and engagement. A circulating collection is only as strong as the community who utilizes it. Getting the community involved and making them feel included will always be the focus when managing the collection. So these are just some of the things that we did. We dissolved the reference collection. We collaborated with the DEI committee and department liaisons to make deselection decisions, which is important, right? So you don't want to create a list of discarded books without discussing it with the liaison of that department. Our efforts regarding weeding, deselecting were simply not enough. If we wanted to promote our collection, we had to find other ways to reach the community. Programming and book displays have been our go-to this year. DEI programming such as International Movie Night and book discussions. Displays highlighting different awarenesses of the month have also helped to promote parts of our collection, partnering with other departments to create displays using our books to highlight their events or themes. These are just a few ways you can use to promote the collection you have. We look forward to doing more programming, more partnerships, and working with other colleges and universities. Thank you for listening. I may not have shared anything new, but it's my hope that I have inspired you to look at what you have to make room for what is to come. And these are just some of the other ideas that you can use. So library programming, outreach, maybe with your public libraries, partnerships with other departments, book displays, and keep the conversation going. You may not realize that the books that you have are important. And as long as people don't know what's in your library, what you have, you may continue to have issues of low usage statistics in terms of circulation. Outreach and continuously talking about the library is going to be the most important aspect of building a collection based on what you have before you start to add additions to the library collection. So thank you for listening. And that's it. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Thank you so much, Professor Sinclair. Next, we have Professor Samantha Diacunto from the New York Botanical Gardens.
Thanks, Nelson, and great job, Dana. I'm going to share my screen, and we practiced this, and I had a little bit of trouble, so just bear with me, everyone. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Samantha DeCunto. I am the Manager of Public Services and Reference Librarian at the Leicester T. Mertz Library at the New York Botanical Garden. My presentation today, entitled Insert Here, Writing Collection Exploration into the Syllabus. Sorry, are you seeing my video as well?
No, just seeing insert here, writing collection exploration to the syllabus, the introductory slide.
Wonderful, thank you. This presentation will share the New York Botanical Gardens Mertz Library's collaboration with Lehman College's Lab for Social Analysis. In the presentation, I will cover how this partnership came about, how it was facilitated, collections and resources used, student and faculty feedback, and our future plans. So before I dive into it, I think it's best to take a moment to share with you a bit about each of the partners involved. Founded in 1899, the Mertz Library is the largest botanical and horticultural library in the Western Hemisphere. Our renowned collections of published and unpublished works trace the development of history of botany, exploration, horticulture, and garden landscape design from the 12th century to present day. Supported by the Mellon Foundation, the Humanities Institute is a center for innovative thinking into bridging the humanities and sciences through interdisciplinary research projects using the Garden's library historic collections. And the Lehman Lab for Social Analysis has a mission to foster research by students on issues of their lived experiences, as well as their communities. So the course was entitled, Let's Go Bananas, and the instructors from Lehman College, Stephanie Roop and Alicia Galvez, developed this course where students were tasked with engaging in an ethnographic and historiographic exploration of bananas and plantains. In 2021, the Humanities Institute decided to shift focus from the history of science and landscape design to supporting the growing field of the food humanities. So in 2022, when we were invited to participate in the development of the Let's Go Bananas course, we jumped to the opportunity. We began conversations about this course in the spring of 2022 for the course to be hosted that fall. Present in the conversations were myself, a librarian or reference librarian, the humanities director, and the two instructors. During the planning conversations, we discussed our shared goals for the partnership as well as the course. We developed supportive reading lists and special collection displays. And this was the stage where it was absolutely crucial to have a librarian in the conversation. And I'm very grateful that the team felt similarly. And we also took this time to schedule on-site research, visits, and library instruction. So over the course of 14 weeks of the Let's Go Bananas course, only 5 weeks were on site at the New York Botanical Garden. The goal was to expose students to as many resources and perspectives related to the history and science of bananas and plantains, and create inclusive pathways for the students who gravitated towards humanities to engage with the science of those topics. In the library, we were able to provide an introduction to the library and its resources, hands-on exploration of the collections, allowing students into the stacks and the rare collections and archives. And we, the library staff, myself included, consulted with the students on their project plans and resource requests. We guided discussions of rare books and special collections to talk about topics such as decolonization and inclusivity. Across the garden, the library coordinated and collaborated with different departments to provide various tours, lectures, and different events. Some of the additional opportunities that the students were able to enjoy as part of the course was hands-on plantings at our Edible Academy. So they got their hands in the dirt to understand what it took to maybe plant a banana plant. And then they had a cooking demo at the Edible Academy with guest chef Erwin Sanchez, who is a Natural Mexican chef. They also received guided tours of the New York Botanical Garden exhibit entitled Around the Table, which focused on food stories. And they received a tour and collection exploration opportunity in our herbarium, which, as you can see on the left bottom image, are dried plant specimens of particular plants collected by botanists in the field. So our collections at the library were able to support a variety of assignments that the instructors developed. So you can see a sample of the assignments on the slide here. The instructors even encouraged multilingual approaches to these assignments, which our collection was fully able to support since the Mertz Library holds 86 different languages throughout our collection. This is a good time to reiterate that this assignment and flexibility of assignments was not only inclusive, but it was only made possible when a librarian who knew the collection, such as myself, was at the writing stages from the very beginning of this syllabus. So to conduct research for the assignments, the students, in addition, consulted printed works, such as histories, novels, reports, and they also searched databases like the Biodiversity Heritage Library, EBSCO, JSTOR, and the USDA. Guided discussions of our rare books and special collections enhanced their understanding of the project, of their project-specific topics through the humanities-focused conversations, such as botanical illustration, histories of science expeditions, and biographies of scientists. Because I was in conversation with all of the students as they were developing their research proposals, I was able to select items related to each individual student in some way. And mostly shown and pictured on this slide were rare books from the years between 1500 to about 1753. Not pictured here were special collections which included cookbooks, nursery catalogs, and botanical stamps, all related to bananas and plantains. A special note about the frontispiece pictured here on this slide. So it's the image on the left with the two columns with people and then the text in the center. This is the first ever Flora of Mexico by Francisco Hernandez in 1651. This text is so important because it's the first, but it's also because it was written in Latin as well as the Mexican language Nahuatl. So throughout the text, it has descriptions and illustrations of the flora and fauna of Mexico, and in some cases, recipes written in Latin and Nahuatl. These recipes were later created by the guest chef Erwin Sanchez, a Nahuatl Mexican chef, at the Edible Academy for the students. So the students were able to taste a recipe from 1651, seen in a rare book in our library, and use that recipe to physically taste what they were reading. So after a semester-long stretch of original research, students' final presentations were nothing short of impressive. They were wonderful, they were creative. They utilized a range of materials in the library to advance their understanding of banana topics. And some themes explored in the presentations were broad and some were more specific. And some general themes included histories of globalization, migration, and colonization. Some focused on plant sciences, nutrition, and quite a few focused on the trade, advertising, and capitalism aspects of the banana industry. A few of my favorite examples of student research were one, a student used the library's historic cookbook collection to anchor her study of the changing place of bananas in Bronx specific cooking. And another was the science of banana pathogens and its effect on the banana biodiversity. Overall, the variety of assignments, the creative use of collections, and just the overall support from the instructors engaged every student in ways I personally have not experienced as a student or as an educator. The development of this course was inclusive from the very first day of planning, and it paid off. Students who appeared to be disinterested at the start of the course quickly became active participants and creative researchers. Inclusivity when writing collection exploration into the syllabus is to really take time to understand and know that there will be students who need creative outlets and a variety of pathways to the information being shared. Now, this could look like presenting various formats such as multimedia content, print materials, and art, or it could be emphasizing the humanities angle to teach the science topic and vice versa. At the end of the course, the instructors surveyed the students, and the results reflected the overall positive response from the students. The comments used language that made clear to us that we succeeded in providing inclusive pathways throughout the semester. The questionnaire included in the multiple choice question, pictured here on the slide, reads, in your opinion, what were the best aspects of the course? The professors ranked very, very well at 90%. And then highlighted on the graph is the sessions at the Botanical Garden, so our library, and that came in about 76%. When they asked a free-form response question, should Lehman College offer future courses in collaboration with NYBG, why or why not, the responses were mostly positive. And it was rewarding to hear students say things like they felt motivated or scholarly in our library space, but it really would have been nice to understand where we could have improved. Course structure results were very kind as well, and the comments were even kinder. They were really big fans of their instructors, which says a lot about Stephanie Roop and Alicia Galvez. So from the planning stages of the course, the instructors and myself were really hoping to hear words like safe space, creativity, and excitement coming from the students, and we did. So when they had to fill out the survey, the overall feeling of the course, as you could see in the graph, 81% of the respondents said that the class exceeded their expectations. So what did we get out of it? And, you know, what are some of our outcomes and why you should try it? So, of course, the library, the Mertz library, the collaboration that we did during this time took our partnership with Lehman to another level. It went beyond the basic visit to the garden grounds, the basic visit to the library. It took it to a more substantial and robust partnership. It also provided me a better understanding of how to make our space and collection welcoming and inclusive for all. Of course, it exposed us to mostly local students who I am so honored to report that have since the course have applied for our Humanities Institute Urban Foodways fellowships and have come back to use the library space for study. We're only 20 minutes away from Lehman. And of course, our collection usage increased during this time. Some of the outcomes of this partnership, the successes include it provided different perspectives of our collections that were both enjoyable to my staff as well as the students. I think the biggest one for me, the biggest success was that our librarians were respected as equal educators and contributors throughout the entire process by both faculty and students. And another positive thing that came from this was that the instructors are now open to exploring partnerships at other libraries for their future courses. And of course, we recommended that they pitch something similar to the Leonard Leaf Library at Lehman, who has phenomenal collections there. This was not without challenges. And as you can imagine, coordinating between two institutions, but Lehman College, NYBG as an umbrella institution, and the library as a sub department was very challenging. But it was done. We did it. So don't let that deter you. And the students towards the end of the course needed, of course, you're all familiar with this, but they needed more assistance at the end of the course. And it was difficult because we had to provide research support for 21 students all at once. And with our small team and us not being used to that sort of scheduling, it overwhelmed us a little bit. And as you are also all familiar with, shelving all those materials at the end was definitely quite cumbersome. But that shouldn't deter you, and here is why you should try it. Overall, the course was tremendously productive, and it highlighted skills for both the Lehman College faculty as well as the NYBG staff. It highlighted collections. The way this course was written and the way the library collections were incorporated created inclusive, welcoming space for all learners, all types, and all levels. And your students would enjoy the opportunity to touch collections they wouldn't normally have access to. So this wonderful potential for cross-institutional and interdisciplinary collaborations has us looking forward to future collaborations with hopefully some of you. But in the meantime, we look forward to continuing our relationship with Lehman College. And we're in conversation about hosting the Let's Go Bananas course again, possibly this fall. We're looking into trying out other courses. So next week, we have Lehman College's dietetic internship cohort visiting for a one-day course and collection exploration day. But we would also like to branch out and work with other institutions on something similar. So for example, we could foresee a partnership with the Bronx Documentary Center, where they write a syllabus for the Junior Photography League, using our collections in photography to explore different formats as well as photographers. So we're open to partnerships. I hope you reach out. But for the Humanities Institute, we continue our mission to spotlight the food humanities. So there are internships available. And this summer, we welcome a new cohort of the Urban Foodways interns. And I'm most certain I'm going to see familiar faces from Lehman College again. And this year, the Humanities Institute and the New York Botanical Garden horticulture staff have worked together to create the third iteration of the African American Garden. And this year's plants will represent diaspora. So I am personally inviting you all to the opening celebration of the garden, which is free and open to all, to save the date on June 15th. Thank you all for joining and taking the time to listen, and please save your questions till the end.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that fantastic presentation, Samantha. Next, we have our colleague, Professor Eric Silberberg from Queens College, who will be presenting. And the title of their presentation is Internationalizing Book Bans, Comparison of Book Challenge Discourses in Mexico and the United States.
Thank you, Nelson. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Samantha, and for your presentations. And also thanks to the Executive Council for LACUNY for putting together this year's institute. So today I'm going to give a talk, as Nelson said, that I'm calling Internationalizing Book Bans, a comparison of book challenge discourses in Mexico and the United States. And this talk is actually an outgrowth of a broader ethnographic study that me and three co-authors on the screen conducted last year at Mexican normal schools, which are public teacher training schools. And so part of this project involved interviewing normal school graduates who are currently in-service teachers in elementary and middle schools. During fieldwork in September, last September 2023, we found ourselves at that time in the middle of what was a very stressful situation to the teacher participants in our study, as they were embroiled in what was a national political crisis around the dissemination of the new free national textbooks, which are called the libros de texto gratuitos, which are the free national textbooks. The books for the 2023-24 school year were unique in that they were part and parcel of a brand new curriculum. And they were also noted and objected to because of their increased representation of gender and sexual diversity, as well as presenting a critical view of Mexican history. This provoked a strong reaction from the right. Parents groups such as on the screen right here, which is the National Union of Parents of Families, la Unión Nacional de Padres de Familia. They staged protests across the country, such as this one pictured here, in the largely majority mestizo state and conservative state of Aguascalientes. States under the politically conservative PAN party all successfully sued in Mexican federal court to prevent the distribution of these books. During our project, it took place in the states of Guanajuato and Puebla, and the state of Guanajuato was one of the states that had prevented the distribution of the new textbooks. There were also several documented cases around the country of book burnings of the textbooks, and in an interesting development pictured here, in an indigenous community in the state of Chiapas in the south of Mexico, was a public book burning of the new textbooks. And we'll come back to this at the end. So I'm calling this a comparison of, internationalizing book bans. And I thought that it was, this is something a bit new, and that I'm testing out here in this talk. And I thought that it connects nicely with the theme for this year's Institute and moving beyond the challenge librarian to get this international perspective on something that was occurring both in the United States and Mexico at the same time last fall. And it's also really special to me too, because I'd like to thank Nelson, who actually helped read over and give suggestions to my initial application for funding for this project, as well as really a deep connection too to what President Drabinski talked about during her keynote this morning. At the same time here in the United States, we saw at the same, September of 2023, an 18-fold increase in the number of book challenges across this country. And so to me, it was remarkable, the similarity in the discourse surrounding the book challenges in both countries. And I thought it was odd that we didn't hear about this parallel censorship movement occurring at the same time, just south in Mexico. So my co-authors and I have a forthcoming article based on our interviews with the teachers concerning their views on the book banning campaigns across Mexico at the start of the school year. But today I want to take what we learned during fieldwork and begin to construct a comparison of book banning discourses between, sort of what we found in fieldwork and what was going on here in the United States at the same time. So first, I'd like to give an overview of this theoretical framework that we developed to analyze the bans in an international context. And that will lead to these three interrelated rights that emerged from our analysis of the textbook ban in Mexico. And I'd like to compare it to the US context. So these three rights that we'll look at is a right to read, the rights of parents, and the right of indigenous autonomy. And there is a sort of an interplay and a tension among these three competing rights. So a theoretical framework. And something that was very interesting to me in the project was to engage with literature about book bans from both the United States and Latin America. So in Latin America, a really interesting term that came up that was biblioclastia or biblioclasm, which is a broader catch-all term to describe very different, very interrelated and distinct forms of book destruction. And so Umberto Eco has a wonderful article where he outlines sort of a typology of book destruction activities or of biblioclasm. And the first that he talks about is for personal interest. So books could be destroyed say, for example, an atlas being torn apart and a bookseller reselling each page of the atlas to kind of make more money than he would if he just sold the original atlas, right? A second type of biblioclasm that Eco talks about is due to carelessness. And so one way to destroy books is to simply just let them die, make them disappear in a remote and out of neglect. And the third, which I think is especially important talking about book ban and censorship movements, is fundamentalist biblioclasm, which Eco describes as individuals who fear the content inside of a book and takes actions to prevent people from accessing that information. And so while forms number 1 and 2 of personal interest and carelessness, I think, make a lot of sense, I was really hung up on trying to understand some more about why someone would, the motivations behind a fundamentalist biblioclasm. And for that, I turned to Emily Knox's analysis of fundamentalist book bans in US school districts. And she argues that bans in school systems arise from what she calls a monosemic interpretation of text, which means that people pursue book bans because they believe that a text can hold only one meaning. They believe that students are highly impressionable, like an empty vessel, and thus a text they encounter in school will undoubtedly indoctrinate them. And there can only be one method of indoctrination from a particular book. So with these two theories, I arrived at the idea that book bans and book burnings can fall under the broader umbrella of fundamentalist biblioclastic activities, and that individuals commit biblioclasm when they fear the content of a book, which can have only one meaning. Furthermore, they believe that young people are empty vessels and will adopt that singular meaning without question. So I'd like to apply that framework to these three rights that emerged in the discourse around book bans. So the Mexican teachers that we interviewed evoked often in the interviews the rights of their students to have access to their national textbooks. They argued that the state level book bans and protests work to undermine their ability as teachers to bring a variety of sources to the classroom, as well as their ability to teach students to evaluate these sources, essentially to teach critical thinking, or what librarians and others would call information literacy. So where does this expression to read come from in Mexico? Actually, in fact, in the Mexican Constitution, in the third article of the Mexican Constitution, it enshrines the right to a free, public, and secular education. It creates a right for young people to learn, which we can extrapolate to mean also a right to read. Since the 1960s, the Mexican Federal Secretariat of Public Education has pointed to this authority when it publishes the free national textbooks. By comparison, in the United States, our public schools have to buy textbooks from private publishers. Education here in the US is, by way of our 10th Amendment in the Constitution, right, a right reserved to the states. And during the 2023 surge in book challenges, the American Library Association's Freedom to Read statement was frequently cited. This statement positions itself as an outgrowth of the First Amendment, with, the right to freedom of speech and the freedom of press. The statement describes a freedom of what ordinary individuals to exercise critical judgment, to select the good and reject the bad. So it's very much a document that's marked by its origins in the 50s during the time of the House Un-American Activities Committee. And it's framed mainly as a right to judge information, not as a right to access information. And there is no specific mention of a right for children. So moving to a right about the rights of parents, in both the Mexican and US context, what I notice is that there's a tension between the right to read and the rights of parents. So in Mexico, the National Union of Parents of Families, La Unión Nacional de Padres y Familia, has protested the national textbooks since their advent. And as one observer put it, quote, "The Mexican Constitution establishes that education will be secular, free, and mandatory. Of these three conditions, only gratuity, only that it's free, seems to be accepted by the Union, the National Union of Parents of Families." So the UNPF protests have been a perennial issue in Mexico. The launch of the free textbooks in 1960 faced protests and book burnings, and they claimed that it usurped the powers, the rights of parents, and that it promoted atheism and communism. They took similar actions during the 1970s when sex and reproductive education was introduced into the textbooks. And then again in 2009, there was another rash of protests and book burnings in response to content on gender and sexual diversity for the first time in the books. So in the case of the US, we do have a long history of parents' rights groups getting involved in school boards or protesting parts of the school curriculum to which they object. And President Drabinski talked about this in her keynote this morning. So there is certainly a right of parents to educate their children, but this creates a tension with the right to read. Acts of fundamentalist biblioclasm align with, as I showed before, Knox's concept of the monosemic interpretation of text. So parents groups that have been involved in challenging books have done so out of a fear that students will adopt ideas to which parents groups object. We see both in the US and Mexico this tension rise up when it comes to representing sex, gender, or a critical take on national history. Also in both contexts, parents groups feel empowered to impose their views on the education of all children, the education system, and not just over their own children, while they defend their right to control the education of their children. They take the rights of parents to be a license to control the education of all. So the final right that emerged during our research was that of indigenous autonomy. And I started the presentation by showing a still of an indigenous community in Chiapas burning the new national textbooks. We interviewed teachers in an elementary and middle school in a majority Nahuatl-speaking community in the Mexican state of Puebla. Puebla was a state that did distribute the new textbooks. And while the teacher said that parents had not objected to the new books, the school ended up engaging anyway in a type of self-censorship, and they avoided pages or sections that they felt had material that could be objectionable to the community. And this was also in light to news stories about book burnings in other indigenous communities. The teachers did say, however, that they felt that the 2023-2024 edition of the textbooks were unique in the way that they portrayed indigenous culture. And they felt that it did so without falling into usual stereotypes that had marked previous editions, such as only talking about indigenous cultures with respect to mythology or history that predates the Mexican state. The textbooks also provided material for teaching indigenous languages, which several participants in the study showed us and talked about. The literature here in the US demonstrates teachers and librarians also undertaking self-censorship when faced with possible biblioclastic action. So here's a painting from a painting of the famed revolutionary leader Emiliano Zapata outside one of the elementary schools where we conducted interviews. The school is named for Zapata as well. And I'm showing this on the one hand because we see in the Mexican context a strange alignment on the one hand, or from one point of view, this strange alignment between a Catholic right wing and indigenous communities over the issues in the textbooks, that they are an imposition of the state. But I think there is actually quite a bit of daylight between these two groups. We can look at it from a different standpoint, that we can understand indigenous communities objecting to the national textbooks as part of a longer history of resistance to the Mexican state. Another way to understand the education in Mexico and the national textbooks is a project of nation building by way of forced assimilation, and as many Mexican legal scholars have also cited, as a form of ethnocide. Also, the Mexican education system has long neglected education in rural and indigenous communities. This we saw as well during our work. So, as in the photo here of the school library in the middle school I was talking about, and it brings me to return to Echo's typology of biblioclasm, where here we have a clear example of biblioclasm, not by way of book burnings, not by way of fundamentalism, but by neglect of the state. And so this was a school library for a school population of around 500 to 600 students. And to kind of wrap up my thinking about the interplay between these three rights, in Mexico, the ongoing battle for autonomy primarily targets the state. In contrast, in the United States, right-wing parents groups are objecting to critical assessments of how Native Americans are portrayed in children's literature. So, for example, Debbie Reese, who's the founder of American Indians in Children's Literature, which scrutinizes the representation of Native youth in children's literature, has highlighted how groups like Moms for Liberty have expressed their opposition to children's literature that challenges outdated stereotypes of Native people and critiques and they've also objected to children's books that critique the historical mistreatment of Indigenous people. And they claim that this is for fear that young people will feel guilty about US history. So Reese and others work to have a more authentic representation of Native people in children's books with the goal to empower young people. So she sees state bans such as one currently in Arizona as a way to prevent that sort of empowerment. So with that, I'll wrap up, and this is sort of an early way that I've been thinking about the interplay between these three rights based on the research that we did on the effect of book bans on, of the ban of the national textbooks with my co-authors this past fall. So thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation, Eric. Looking forward to your published research. So I stopped the recording because the planning committee agreed not to record the questions and answers. So the only segments of these presentations that will be available online on YouTube when we upload them, the presentations will be the presentations and not necessarily the Q&A session, because they're sessions that where people may discuss very sensitive items. I just want to thank our three wonderful presenters from this session, from panel 3, for your presentations. And I want everyone to know that the LACUNY Institute Day 1 is officially over, and we will continue tomorrow. So I hope that you can join us at 10 a.m. and we will be over at 2 p.m. tomorrow. So thank you all so much, and a round of applause for the wonderful work of our colleagues here.